How are you?
Good morning, mate. I'm great. How about you?
Fantastic. Let me just turn that down a little. Let me just fuck. My screen's a little blurry. The lighting.
Right. Did you learn
Is
that
it?
from all your years of, behind the scenes and in the TV industry? Is that what it was? Spit on
That's
it
it.
and wipe it with your
That's it.
t-shirt.
That's it, mate. That's exactly it. It's a grey old morning here, so it's raining. So usually I get a little bit of sunlight, but it's
Yeah.
super dark. This
It's the same here, man. It's yesterday was just such an amazing day. It was super hot and it was just beautiful. It was picturesque. But today it's overcast and raining and it's the same. It's doom and gloom. I've got lights on and bits and pieces in here, and you try and get everything like looking good. And then like, in half an hour, like if the sun comes through, everything I'll just have a white face, and everything will look shit. So it's just like I can't win. But anyway.
It looks like you got a little white thing just on your lip. I don't know if it's a sesame seed or something. Or there it
No,
goes.
there you go. Bit of fluff. Oh, thanks
Bit
for
of
pointing
fluff.
that out.
That's what I do, mate.
Good on you. Oh, what's new with you? How have you been, Pete?
Mate, been fantastic. Like really,
Sweet.
really, really, really good. Yeah, just having a ball, just surfing
Good.
heaps, and been learning how to foil surf the last year or two, and
What's foil surf?
it's so it's same as surfing, but you're on a different board. It's got this big mast and then a big sort of wing,
Oh, yeah, I
and
know the ones. Yeah, and you sort of
when
bob up and get it going, that sort of thing.
yeah, so it's more like snowboarding on the ocean rather than um, surfing. Surfing's a lot of pretty back foot, whereas this is very front foot, but it's a very different experience because you're once you're on the wave, you're basically on the foil, and the board is that much higher, that maybe that much higher out of the water. So
Yeah,
it feels like it feels like you're flying, and you go so fast, and you catch
really.
so many more waves. It's like I think I would dare say it's the evolution of surfing if people want to do it. And
Is that right?
yeah, and they've designed these new little things out of South Australia called the foil drive. So it's a propeller, like an e-bike, but they've created it for foil surf.
Mm.
So you can go out there on a battery that lasts for about an hour, and you catch 30 waves. So if you got a couple of batteries, you go out there for 2 hours. And usually when you surf, you might get 3 to 5 waves in an hour surf or 2 hour surf,
Is that
and
right? I did not know
it,
that.
and you're usually surfing like depending on the length of the wave, each wave might be 5 or 10 seconds depending on where you're
Oh,
surfing. So in an hour surf, you might actually be surfing for fucking less than a minute. you know?
all together.
Whereas you're foiling for fucking like the whole time,
Yeah.
pretty much, and wave after wave after. It's surfing's a lot about patience, but when you're doing this, it's just you're on the whole
Just
time.
go.
You're
Yeah,
doing
yeah, yeah.
something. So I love it, and it's been so good for the brain because I turned 52 this year, and when we learn new things, it just activates us, and it keeps us young and curious and humble. And
Yes.
it's good to be a beginner again at something, and go through
Yeah.
that big growth spurt.
Yeah, absolutely. And this must be why surfers are so calm and laid back, because they're just probably the most patient fucks around. They have to be out there just waiting for the right wave, and then only know that they're going to get a minute of joy to go back and wait for the right wave again. That's why they're just so chill.
Yeah, I had Kelly Slater on years ago on the podcast, probably 4 years ago, and I had this perception that surfers not only do they healthy people, but let me just fix my microphone there. Um, but I had this realization that there could be something about being a surfer and just looking at the horizon um, for a very long period of time every day,
Mhm.
because in this day and age, there's so many people, they're looking at their screen most of the day, or they're reading a book, or whereas I think once upon a time, as nomadic people and hunters and gatherers, but especially the hunters, we would have activated that long vision as part of our evolutionary history. And when I've thought about it, like how many people these days actually get to activate that sort of that long form vision where they're looking at the horizon or they're looking out into the far distance. And I thought this is a really great metaphor for being able to change our vision on the world or our experience of it by having that long vision, that long perception, looking at the horizon. And I think it brings up contemplation instead of short-term vision, because a lot of people are stuck in short-term sort of reality, like what's happening right now to them, then they react to it, and that either creates states of fight or flight. Um, and so I think, as you said, patience for surfers and perhaps sailors and skiers and hikers and this type of thing can be something that we can, for people with anxiety as well, and perhaps just looking at the horizon, looking into the distance, looking from a mountaintop, just can give you a greater perspective on our place in the world, and not be so reactionary and just that's I'm going
Yeah.
on a tangent here, but I think it's worth contemplating, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think you're on a winner. I mean, we live in this fast-paced world where, instant coffee is too slow. Everything is a quick hit of dopamine. You've got your phones, you've got porn, you've got just everything's like everyone's got 5 apps or 6 apps, and we flick between them in a heartbeat, and then we go back to the first one because fuck, I've missed something in the last 5 minutes since I've been scrolling. So we've got this sort of ADD mindset, and I think like what I love about what you're saying is that almost forced contemplation, because you're not out there rolling through Instagram reels while you're waiting for the next wave. You're in the moment, or you're chatting with a buddy, or you're out on your own, that sort of thing. So I think it kind of forced you to be still for a long period of time. And that sort of infuses this, I don't know if the word's stoic, or like this sort of sense of calm, this sense of patience, and you've also got to be in the moment because you're waiting for the wave. Like you don't want to be fucking around and then miss it, because like you said, you're going to get 5 waves at best. So if you are distracted and then you miss the wave, I mean, like your morning's ruined, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think for me especially, I'm a pretty laid back, chilled person. It is my personality. And what I've found in the ocean, and you can ask my wife, she goes, you change into a different person. You become like the alpha out there,
Is that right?
And I've thought about it, and it's like, well, maybe again, it's in our DNA as uh, men, perhaps. And I don't mean to point this out as just a male thing, but once upon a time we used to hunt, and obviously women would hunt as well. But where do we hunt these days, as whether it be our initiation um, period from child to adult, but where do men hunt these days? And surfing for me is a hunting sport. You are out there, as you said, you're hunting for the wave,
Mm.
and it does change um my energy when I'm out there 100%, because I go into that state of I'm hunting because it brings me a lot of pleasure, but there's this primal instinct that comes over me. I'm just
Yeah.
like, fuck, I'm out here to conquer my beast, or catch the beasts that are out there. And
Yeah.
and I think there's been an explosion of people searching for these big waves over the last few years, and you've probably seen it on Instagram and news programs where the biggest wave ever has ever been ridden. And I think that's probably because, there is this lack of this initiation for men these days, and perhaps women as well, to um, to give us that sense of facing our fears.
Mm.
And the ocean has definitely enabled me to face quite a lot of my fears. I used to have a fear of sharks, and whether that was due to watching Jaws at a very young age, or the
Most
the
likely.
mainstream media loves to talk about a shark attack. It
Mm.
becomes mainstream news for one death, and it's tragic, of course, but you don't see the outrage or the fascination over chronic illness that causes
Yep.
so many deaths.
Mm.
It's like, why is that so um, such an attractive thing for the news stations to promote, rather than what is actually killing more and more people daily in a more, I would say, probably horrific way,
Yeah.
long-term chronic um, degeneration of the human body.
Mm.
And I was contemplating that this morning when I woke up, actually. It was, I'm stepping back out into the realm, because I've got a new book that just launched yesterday in the States, and it's
Cool.
called Healthy Food for Healthy Kids. And I was thinking about the times that I used to be interviewed by mainstream media, and the the fact that they'd always sort of go into the character assassination of somebody like myself or Bobby Kennedy Jr. or others, instead of them asking the question, the most common sense question is, so tell us about all the people that have adopted what you're talking about and how they've changed their life. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be such a beautiful question for these people to lead with mainstream media? Like, how have people reclaimed their health? Take us on that adventure, Mr. Evans or Mr. Kennedy, instead of, well, the experts say that you're dangerous because of what you're promoting: organic food,
Yeah.
regenerative farming practices, time in nature,
Yeah, you're going against science, and what you're doing is harming people, and what about them? So yeah, I mean, like all you're explaining to me, Pete, is fear cells, right? So I mean, it's just
Yeah.
one of those things, and if I can activate that primal, you know, baseline of fear that everyone has, it's like it activates you, and like you said before, it's that fight or flight, and if you have a world in fight or flight, I mean, it's chaos at best, and it's a controlling mechanism. So it's yeah, 100%. Like the news would never end if we always focused on the people that died from alcohol, drunk driving, cigarettes, obesity, and all that kind of stuff. Like the news would be 24 hours a day, and that's all it would be. It'd just be two topics about everyone dying every 5 seconds about this horrible disease. But they can even, back to the sharks, they can even show that a shark was spotted near a surfer. So like nothing happened, but it was near the surfer. So this surfer was so close to dying that, and he didn't know it. And so, there's this big hammerhead or this big shark or whatever it is. And they're like, see how bad this is? And then you go into the water and you're like, fuck, man, I don't know if I'm swimming next to a giant animal that's going to eat me any second now. Whereas, like, I
Well,
interviewed Ocean Ramsey, and have you seen her when she
yeah.
swims with these monsters? Like, they are maybe 5, 6 times the human body, maybe more. I don't know, maybe 15 times. Like, it's fucking in the difference between her and the ocean and this shark is just wild. And she's like, redirect and all this shit. I'm just like, yeah, but she's like, people misunderstand these things. But again, it's the fear and all of those things. So anyway, I
Well, it's
digress.
no, it's beautiful, because it's really interesting. I was talking about facing my own fears, and I think that is a powerful tool for us to become stronger, and to be less reactive. And I'll give you a great example. So it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and my local surfing beach, I pulled up there, and and pulled into the car park. And as I often do, I have a chat to the people. I saw these guys walking back with their boards. I said, "How is it out there?" And they're like, "Oh, it's pretty good, but they just shut the beach because there's a shark out there." You know, the surf lifesavers announced they sung the alarm. And I'm like, "Oh, cool." And I went straight out there, it's to say. And once upon a time, I used to be so fearful of sharks. And once you realize, as you said, um, I'll tell you the honest truth, they're out there and they're swimming around, in the vicinity of us, probably
Yes.
more often than you would like to acknowledge. They're just
Yeah.
out there. It's their territory. And I went out there on the board, and I was having a chat to a fella the next day, and he goes, "Yeah, there's been a big 3.5 meter. It's not 3.5 meter isn't a huge great white, but there's been a 3.5 meter great white. There's been a 3 meter tiger shark, and it's been hanging out here for the last. Well, they have been hanging out here for the last couple of weeks. All the surfers have seen them. One came past the line of surfers the other day between them and the beach, and no one got out,
Yeah.
because it's a shark generally, or you will never see a shark come to you or
Yeah,
attack.
exactly right.
Very rarely, they're master predators, they're master hunters. Talking about hunting, and if it wants you, it'll take you. And
Mm.
but there's also obviously common sense. But my thought is they're always out there, and I'll share this story with you because I think it's pertinent to us. And there's only been probably 3 or 4 times in my 40 years now of being in the ocean as a surfer where I've actually got out of the ocean, because I've had this innate intuition, I guess you would call it, where every cell in my body said, "I don't think you should be out here anymore. Something doesn't feel right. Go in."
Mm.
That was the voice in my head, and I hadn't seen a shark. I didn't know if there was one out there, but there's this great story about horses that if a herd of horses or horses are out grazing, and a mountain lion or a bobcat or a predatory animal is in their vicinity, and those animals are on the hunt, the predator animal is wanting a feed, the horses will be able to feel that predatory intent before they've seen it or before they've heard it. They
Mm.
can feel the intention and they will flee the area. And what's fascinating, from what I understand, is once that animal or the predator has had its feed and it's no longer in that predatory state, the horses can be in the vicinity of one of these animals without having to flee because it's not in that predatory state.
Mm.
And it brings me back to those experiences where I've got out of the ocean, because I believe as human beings we would have had that sixth sense, or whatever sense that is,
And still
of
do. Mm.
predator. Yeah. And so I find that fascinating because there's this part like, why do I've come in from the ocean and there was good waves out there, and there's no indication that I saw a fin or a shark or anything like that, but it was like time to get out, and
Mm.
I've trusted myself in those instincts, or those situations. And no doubt it's happened for people that have left a nightclub and walking down the street, and a group of guys that have, you
Yeah,
know,
that's it.
you know, in that same instinct. So I guess
I
what
don't
I'm
think a
saying
lot of
is,
people, I don't think a lot of people tap into that though, Pete. Like they just forget that they have this ability and think it's we're talking nonsense or woo-woo shit, when you start to think about a sixth sense. I don't think people tap into that voice. They don't even know what it sounds like. Or what it feels like. It's I don't know, it's foreign to majority
yeah,
of people, I would say.
well, you hear the stories of the people that the plane crash or the car crash, and they've decided on that day, oh, something's not right here. I shouldn't go on that flight here. So I guess what I'm saying is, we can contemplate and explore our intuition. And sometimes it might seem woo-woo or whatever it is, but there seems to be some pretty um, pretty compelling evidence out there that we are highly intelligent beings with these amazing senses that can help guide us on this journey.
Mm.
And but yeah, I'm grateful to be able to confronted my fears with sharks and with big waves, and because it's helped to open myself up to a more beautiful experience in my life by not only the time that I spend at the ocean, but also going on media interviews as well into mainstream media and
You
you
can
know
apply it to everywhere in life.
yeah, exactly, public speaking, setting boundaries for ourselves,
Yeah.
this, that, and the other, or the biggest one that people often fall into the trap of fear is not believing that they can set their own goals and then manifest them into reality. I think that's a huge one for people. For
Just having
a lot.
courage, Pete. You're just having courage to
Well,
act, you know?
I think a lot of people, from my understanding, have a fear of failure. And that's something that I've never had. It's like, for whatever reason, I've never had that issue of knocking on 1,000 doors, and I don't mind if I'm rejected by 1,000 people. I'm like,
Mm.
sweet, sweet,
I was
sweet.
the opposite. I was like, please don't reject me. I don't know. I got some fucking father issue that I need to sort it out the last few years. So, but we won't go there on this podcast. We might save that for another conversation. But I think in some of the things that I'm really happy to hear about you, and I think anyone who's listening should take a little note, because one of the things that I do when I'm working with people on their own self limitations and things like that is creating habits of like what I call little wins. And I think going to this, like to having a surf and having that get up, the ritual of getting up, going there, putting on the wetsuit or whatever it is, getting in the water, catching a few waves, coming home. That little win for you, it sets you up for the rest of the day. And for me, it's going to the gym. For you, like learning a new skill, when you were talking about what's it called, wellboard.
Foil boarding.
Foil, that's it, almost. So boarding, right, is like you're expanding your brain, you're expanding your capacity, you're growing an instrument within the body that is designed to learn new things, right? So for me, that was mixed martial arts about a year and a half ago. So it's like 40 at the time, 45, going into mixed martial arts with young kids that are just like little whippersnappers, and they kill it and they got heaps of energy. But I've got an ego that just doesn't want to be squashed. So I try and keep up with them as best I can, and I don't want to fail. But again, for me, it's a mind expanding exercise. But I guess the point I was trying to make is like having little wins in your life. That's yours. That's yours for today, because shit can go wrong at home with the kids, at work. Things can inevitably just like mess up. But that thing for you is that's your win for the day. That's a little tick in the box. And if you can check that off as often as possible, it just creates a habit of winning. Whereas most people are just fighting through life.
Yeah, 100%. Like this morning, we're doing this interview at 7 a.m. and which is a nice time for me. Sometimes when I do
Yeah,
the
same.
American podcasts, it's 5 in the morning for me.
Yeah.
But we've we purchased a ice bath years ago,
Hmm.
and we got it set between 2 and 3 degrees Celsius. And before I pop on this podcast or any podcast in the morning, even at 4:30 in the morning, I jump in the ice bath. You know,
Yeah.
do I look forward to it? Yes and no.
Really? Yeah.
It's like, ooh, well, at that time when it's dark
Yeah, of
outside, it's
course.
like,
Yeah.
ooh, I've just woken up. And so, ooh, here we go. But
And not
I
just in summer.
no, I do it because I know it's going to energize me very, very quickly.
Mm.
And, I respect my either the host like yourself, Adrian, or if I'm interviewing a guest for my podcast, I want to be on. I don't want to be lethargic. I don't want to have a little tiredness when
Yeah.
I'm when I'm in this space, because I value your time and I also value my time. you
Yeah,
know,
man, absolutely.
very, very, very respectful of this interplay that we have, and I also value whoever's listening or watching this as well. It's an investment. Listen, I mean, every man and his dog and woman and their cat have a podcast these days.
Mm.
And I know when we started, it was quite a sort of a new thing. But every day I see another person with a microphone, and for people to invest their time to listen to what people are saying, I think is not to be taken lightly or
Agree.
underestimated, because perhaps something that I share today or you share is the seed that will potentially enrich somebody's life, or give them a different perspective or perception
Mm.
on the reality in which they inhabit. And I love that. I love these opportunities for growth, which is why I host my own podcast, and I've conducted about 500 interviews so far,
Wow,
and
that's
and and
amazing.
I don't see that changing, because it
Are you over 40, successful but unfulfilled? Do you feel stuck, like you're not truly living up to who you really are? So many high achievers wake up and think, I'm a good person, I read all the books, I listen to all the podcasts, yet there's something missing. Well, you're not alone. I've been there myself quite a few times. And quite frankly, it took a lot of years of really fucking around, trying to figure out what I now call your higher self blueprint, which has enabled me to live a life and make a living with my passions and my purpose. If you're ready to break free from a life that's holding you back, I'm hosting a free training around the 5 pillars of success that will enable you to create a more meaningful, fulfilling, and purposeful life. So click the link in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you in the training. But for now, let's get back to the podcast.
it fills my cup in such a beautiful way to be able to sit opposite someone, and this is reciprocated today in the other side, where I get to have a little a little rant,
Mhm.
but to be the student, and to sit there and listen to somebody else. And uh, I think it's so valuable in this day and age, when we can become so consumed in our in our own bullshit,
Yeah,
that it's
absolutely.
really nice to get somebody else's perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that sentiment, and I just want to echo that. I think the desire for human connection now more than ever is something that I think people crave. But there is that fear thing again of like, what if I'm vulnerable? What if I say things that someone doesn't like, and all of those sorts of things? And I think this is an opportunity for people outside of hosting their own podcast to get another human's perspective on the way of the world, or a particular topic, or whatever it may be. So it's cathartic in a sense. It's almost like a therapy session for some people, that they can at least get some sort of glimmer of hope. And if there is that 1% or that little change that they can make or iterate in their lives, and makes a difference, then I guess for you and I would be the same. That sense of contribution, meaning, and purpose, and giving back to the world is, that's another tick in the box. That's another part of your cup that's getting filled. So, and I respect people like you. I always get like really taken aback by the people that I interview, and they say yes. So I just like, I feel like I'm just like this no one from Wollongong, right? I'd like, who am I on this, I'm a speck on the earth. But when people say yes, like yourself, and your time is so valuable, and you're one of those people that everyone's like asking for it all the time. So you've got to be very mindful of your boundaries and who you give time to. So I'm always appreciative and very grateful for these opportunities. So anyway, I wanted to talk about your book. I said to myself this morning, I'm grateful to talk about your book and food and stuff to eat, because the last couple of times that we chatted, it's all about fucking conspiracy theories, and your government's trying to kill you, and it's just like, we're going off on these wild spiritual tangents, which is great, but it's not why I wanted to talk to you. So let's circle back to that. But I guess before I do, I want to maybe get your perspective on like in the States, we've got this Maha movement. There's some things that are just absolutely wild that are happening on the health front, and a lot's happening at one time. Whereas Australia seems to be just stuck in the mud somewhere, right? So, what are your views on what's going on with like Bobby Kennedy Jr.? All of this stuff around seed oils, around cloud seeding, around like you name it.
Wow. So
You don't have to be careful here, Pete. You can just,
no, no,
go along.
I just speak my mind and my heart. So Bobby Kennedy, Trump. I've been fascinated by the show, and I often have on my Telegram page, what a show or enjoy the show. Like it is a show. All of that geopolitical um, theater,
Mhm.
I see it as a show. Now, when we get to choose what we watch of an evening, or how do I phrase this? Some people love watching Netflix of a night time. Or some people love watching Sky News or mainstream news, as their entertainment, or morning TV shows or radio shows. And everyone has free will as to what they get to watch. We're not like um, little Alex in Clockwork Orange, where he's got his eyes peeled open and they're putting the drops in, and he's being reprogrammed through watching some violent viddies or whatever it is to change the way he feels. So
Mhm.
everybody has free will into what they choose to watch or not watch. So let's take Netflix for an example. There is horror that we can see on offer. There is romantic comedy, there's thriller, there's action, there's documentaries, there's a plethora of different genres out there that we can choose to watch. Some people love horror, you know. Um, what does that do to our psychology? What does that do to our dream state? What does that do to our waking life when we are watching programs like that? Some people love comedy. I'm a huge fan of watching comedy before I go to bed. Seinfeld, Big Bang Theory. I have the belief that if I have a really good laugh of an evening, that will set me up for a great dream state. And that you might call that woo-woo, but it's helped me along on my journey to have a really fucking good laugh most days. And I don't need to watch Seinfeld to have a good laugh. I can crack a joke and have a laugh with my wife, playing cards or whatever it may be. But where I'm going with this is, what do we feed ourselves? What do we fuel ourselves? What is our programming that we choose to take in? And when I'm looking at the geopolitical stage of politics, um, I see it as a show. Now, some people really get caught up in the show, like they do with a horror movie or a comedy or a romantic movie, where they cry tears from watching a love story. We've all seen The Notebook and had tears in our eyes, or Free Willy, or something like this, where there's real emotion from what we are taking in from a screen or what we're reading from a book, right? No one can deny that we don't get caught up in this, and it creates an emotional response in us, which can get carried into our day-to-day life or our dream state. So when I've been watching the geopolitical stage, especially Donald Trump and what's been going on over the 8 years, I've made a conscious decision to detach from any possible outcome to the best of my ability, because I do not wish to be caught up into that, where I get emotionally um, hopeful or emotionally distressed, where it causes me um, an imbalance, or to pull myself out of harmony, and not to be grounded in it. So, how do we become the observer of these events without losing our stability, or our balance, or our harmony, or our grounding in this? Because I've seen so often in the truth movements, that people can get very, very unstable in the conspiracy movements because they believe that everything is a threat to them. And I've seen it. I see it in people, and that's just my perception, is that they can get so caught up in the state of events. You mentioned cloud seeding and geoengineering and the conspiracy theories that the government is out to kill us, right? And I'm not discounting that, but I do not want to live in a state of fear or a state of manipulation. And if I wasn't able to detach myself emotionally from the world stage, then I would switch it off, right, completely. And a lot of people do because they can't cope with the theater of it.
Mm.
And a lot of people can't trust in the theater of it as well. There's a huge thing, talking about fears, talking about these deep-seated emotional patterns that human beings have. One of the things I see most prevalent is this element of distrust, and obviously the last 5 years have shone a light on who we can and can't trust,
100%.
in the external, right?
Mm.
Now, if we can't trust, I would always go, if you have a deep level of distrust, I would always start with self. You know, what has happened in my life where I have had an experience where I have lost trust in others and perhaps myself. And it could be a traumatic event from childhood where somebody that we trusted, our guardians, our parents, our best friends, our family, our siblings, our teacher, let us down in a huge way, betrayed us, or we had an experience where we lost trust in somebody that we felt
Mhm.
we we had complete trust in, that they would look after us. When we see this, Kelly Brogan speaks quite eloquently about this, that human beings, especially Western human beings, have put our trust into mummy medicine and daddy government, and I would invite people to look deeply into Kelly Brogan's work about owning oneself, and finding the trust in oneself. So this is a long, long answer to your question
Yeah.
about what's happening overseas, because
Mm.
the reason that I say this is that um, I do not see Trump or Kennedy or anybody external to me as a savior for me that will dictate the way that I choose to live my life,
Mhm.
right? In saying that as well, I'm fascinated by the state of affairs that are playing out now on the global stage for people to witness. 2 hours ago, Tulsi Gabbard just got nominated for, I think, Secretary of Defense or whatever that position is that
Mm.
she was going for. And no doubt in the next 24 hours to 48 hours, perhaps into early next week, we will see whether Robert Kennedy Jr. gets Director of National Institutes of Health and Human Services and these types of positions,
Mhm.
and what the ripple effect of that, or the decline of that nomination will have. You know, I am sweet either way, whether he gets in or whether he gets out. Do I have a preference that I would like? For sure. I would love to see what happens if he gets in. I think that would be a beautiful path for that part of the world to go through, and the ripple effect that will have.
Mm.
But at the same time, if he doesn't get in the next week, um, I'm quite curious and fascinated about what the ripple effect that will have as well.
Mm.
I'm neutral to both, but I do have a preference. That's something that human beings, something that I've learned and deeply embodied, is a neutrality to everything external that happens to me, but I still have my preferences. But if they don't come to fruition at this particular point in time that I expect them to, then I will not get disappointed or get emotionally distressed by that, because there are things that we can't control. I can't control whether Bobby Kennedy Jr. gets nominated or not, you know. I
Yeah,
can't. The only thing I can control is my emotional response to
that's exactly
certain
right.
external things that are out of my control.
Mm,
So I think what we're witnessing here is definitely a new cycle in human awareness and the ripple effect that this is going to have. Um, I have inclinations of what's going to happen, you know, and what I would like to see happen.
mhm,
And I have a timeline of how I would love to see these things play out. But again, I've detached myself from any outcome of this. Um, so if he gets in, well, definitely, let's talk about what's happened over the last 5 years. You know, we are seeing now that we can talk about vaccinations or vaccines, you know, across the board. Not only the COVID vaccine, but all the vaccines now
mhm,
are now quite okay to talk about. And we're witnessing that. 6 years ago, if you had have told me, Pete, in 6 years' time, we're going to be able to talk about vaccines without fear of this, that, or the other. You know, I didn't see that happening, you know, for quite
mm,
some time,
sure.
you know, but thankfully to COVID, we
Mm,
have gone through this metamorphosis. You know, we have gone through, as some would call, the dark night of the soul
yep.
for many people, and we're coming out the other side of that. For some are still in it for sure,
Mm,
but for many, we have had such a drastic change of awareness. Whereas people now, and I get messages every day, no doubt, like you do, of people that said, you know, I thought you were batshit crazy, and I thought you're a nut job and a dickhead and this, that, and the other. And you know, first off, I want to apologize that you know, I based my perception of you through what I read through the mainstream media.
mm,
Now I can see the game that was being played and has been being played for a very long time. And I don't need anybody's apology, and it doesn't interest me to get an apology, but I find it fascinating that more and more people are coming around to questioning mummy medicine and daddy government,
mm.
as Kelly Brogan so eloquently puts out there
Yeah, but
in
I
her
like where you're going with
books.
that, Pete. I think it's bringing a lot of things to the surface, and up until this point, there's been a lot of things that seem to have been conveniently squashed. And you know, when we talk about vaccines, you know, I thought I was on top of the ways of the world in terms of government wars, 9/11, all that kind of stuff. So my initiation was a ways back, right? But when it comes to vaccines, that my initiation to that was in 2020. I watched Ty Bollinger and Charlene Bollinger's series on the truth about vaccines, and at that time you could watch it like bootstrapped on YouTube. Now you can't fucking find these things anywhere, right? So it is bringing things to the surface, and to segue like to your book and about health, I think is it's bringing a lot of things about health and the importance of your health to the surface as well. And even on a deeper level, no pun intended, it's like the soil that your food is grown in, and the actual food and the nutrients within the food and the types of foods. Like, you know, all of that now is coming to like it's bubbling up, and people are again, another pun, like they're eating it up because they're like, you know what, for the first time in my life, I'm getting some real positive direction towards my health, and I'm getting information in real time from people like Pete that can guide me in a way that I can see immediate results. Like, anyway, let's talk about your book and
Yeah.
how you wrote it. I'd
So I
love to
think this
explore all those topics.
well, I think this is going to lead us into the next chapter. Is we've talked about facing fears, and as you know, the dietary space has been mainly co-opted by mainstream media through the dietitians associations and the medical associations. So they have done a very, very good job of promoting the dietary guidelines and really um, attacking what myself and others have been promoting for the last 15 years. And so when it comes to facing a fear, this potentially could be the next adventure for a lot of people to go on because people have been brainwashed and propagandized against eating healthy food. I just have to say, they've been they've been brainwashed into thinking that eating red meat is harmful for you. They've been brainwashed into thinking saturated fat from animals is bad for you. They've been the list goes on and on and on. You must be eating your cereal grains daily so that you're getting your B vitamins and you're getting enough fiber, and the list goes on and on and on. You must be not putting too much salt on your food, otherwise you'll suffer the consequences of that. You must be eating a low-fat diet because if you don't eat low-fat, then you will get cholesterol and heart disease, and the list goes on and on and on. So I don't think it can be underestimated how powerful the propaganda has been to brainwash people into a state of fear around what they're eating. So facing fears, obviously, as we talked about, is a huge thing for people. And if you look at my Instagram page, I share over the last few months what I eat every single day. Um, and I don't really talk about dietary information on my Instagram page or pretty much anywhere. It's in my books. I've been speaking about it for 15 years.
Mhm.
And I'm at the point now where it's like the information's there if people wish to find it for themselves. I never want to force feed anybody my perception, and I would never force anybody to live the way that I live or behave the way I behave or to think the way that I think. It was a great ayahuasca experience many, many years ago where I asked the question, how do we change the world? And the answer that came back to me was you can't. Never try to change people's perceptions, but you can invite them to be curious and to explore different avenues or different perceptions. Invitation is a beautiful word that came to me in that experience, and I've held on to that very dearly ever since, because an invitation allows free will and empowerment for the person that is being invited to go on the exploration. They have free will to accept the invitation or to decline the invitation. Imagine if the COVID experience was an invitation. We invite you to take this vaccine, or we invite you not to take this vaccine. We invite you to stay indoors, or the invitation is to be free. The invitation is to wear a mask or not to wear a mask. You have free will then and power to decline, just like when you get sent an invitation to attend an event or a birthday party or whatever it may be. The power is in your hands without any manipulation from the person that's inviting you.
Mhm.
So I think talking about dietary health, it's an invitation for people to explore what works best for them. And my avenue I go about it is the invitation to look at the food that I share on my plate and the cookbooks that I write and the podcasts that I conduct and the documentaries that we've created. It's an invitation for people to explore if they choose to. And the empowerment always rests in the person that wants to explore, you know, and no disrespect to people, but sometimes the questions that get asked on a social media post, they can find out themselves very quickly in less time than it would have taken them to ask me the question.
Mhm.
There's a great one yesterday. I shared that the book had just come out, and it's an American book. It's created by Children's Health Defense by Skyhorse Publishing in the United States, because there is no publisher at this point in time that wants to bring my work to fruition in Australia. I have
Wow.
reached out to pretty much all the publishers in Australia over the last year or two,
Wow. Yeah.
and said, "Are you ready? The tide feels like it's turning. I invite you to work with me." Right.
Hmm.
And through the grace of Bobby Kennedy Jr., I pitched him this idea, and through his grace, he connected me with Children's Health Defense and also Skyhorse Publishing, um, who he has used to release his Real Anthony Fauci book.
Hmm.
And they agreed. They accepted the invitation to work with me. And so it's an American-based book, and in the States it's $30. It's a hardcover book, or it's Kindle for $20. But to ship it to Australia, it costs a lot of money. Shipping costs are a lot.
Yeah.
And people are like, where can we get it from? But even that question, where do we get it from? Is like, you could type in healthy food for healthy kids shopping, Google,
Hmm.
the question. And and I'm at that point now where I refuse to hold anybody's hand on their journey,
Yeah.
because I feel like it's a place of disempowerment for somebody if they're requesting me to hold their hand on the journey for every step that they need to take. And I, I've I've walked that path, and these days I choose not to, because it comes down to the individual and their tenacity and their willingness to be able to really hold the bull by the horns, and go on this adventure for themselves. And and there are some wonderful people out there that do like to hold people's hands through their journey, and I'm grateful for them and I respect them. But at this point in time in my life, that is something I choose not to do. Like, if you want the book is there. You
Hmm.
have to, you can go on the adventure and find it. I do not want to respond to 50 people's questions
Yeah.
that, and I understand why people do it, because they want that interaction with somebody, and to be seen and to be heard and to be felt and acknowledged. So I get it. But at the same time, I've set a boundary on the amount of hand holding that I'm going to do on somebody's journey these days. Like, my hand holding is the long hours that I spent to put together a book.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree.
that was hundreds of hours to create that, or hundreds of hours of my time to create a documentary, or an hour of my time to do a podcast. It's not the small back and forths of holding hands
Yeah.
anymore. Like,
And there's no
you
shortage of lack of information. I mean, we live in a world where if anything that we desire is instantaneous, it is it's knowledge. I mean, you can go onto YouTube and get a degree within about 100 hours of watching certain things. Like, I don't know how many times I've wanted to figure something out, and whether it be I don't know, something going wrong with my pressure washer, and it's just like it's a YouTube tutorial. It's someone's there to save me at any one time. So the virtual hand holding is always there. But so I
so
get it.
what
I think people want to most likely connect with you because it's you, and you are so giving anyway, like of information. But you have been holding people by the hand for several years now with the Paleo Way and all that kind of stuff. Like, you've got heaps of opportunities for people to explore and go a little bit further.
So I do. We've discussed this before, I think, on a previous podcast. But going into the book and going into what Bobby and others are doing, there was a huge thing the other day about getting the red food dye out of food. That, in the next 2 years, that's going to happen in the United States, and the list will go on with changing the food system. And I have a different approach to that. Is that, you know I believe the lowest hanging fruit is, let's educate people through the books, through the documentaries, through the inspiration that we share through social media. Like, here's my day on the plate, right? Here's um, here's some information that is so common sense, like good quality meat, good quality seafood, local or organic fruit and vegetables and eggs and nuts and seeds if you can tolerate them, and your body will know whether you can tolerate them or not.
Hmm.
Uh, here's here's the lowest hanging fruit. Cook yourself some good food, right? And you will never have to go to the grocery store to pick up a cereal box that may or may not have those red food dyes or those ingredients that people are fighting to get out of the food system. Like when I see the fight that's happening to pull those types of things, get those types of things out of what people would call food, you know, I, I respect it because there are certain individuals out there that love to do that type of work. You
Hmm.
know, they love to fight the conglomerates and fight for food safety, and I respect that. But ultimately, if we don't even need those food products on the shelf for long-term sustainable health. Like I would never go to the grocery store or a supermarket and buy a cereal grain box, a cereal, whether it had it or didn't have that stuff in it, because to me it's not food. It's
Not real
it's not
food.
food. Well, it's food in a sense, but it's not food that we will thrive upon. We can survive on it for sure, for a period of time, but how we can be in this fight for the rest of our lives against the system, the agenda, the corporate dominance of certain things. But at the same time, the system already exists with regenerative farmers, organic farmers,
Mm.
farmers markets. It's already there. We don't need to create it. We don't need to fight against that system, is what I'm saying. And this is a deeper realization. And I could be completely wrong here, and perhaps we need to be fighting against that. But what feels intuitively and
Mm.
instinctively for me, going back to our senses and going back to, you know, if we continue to think we have an enemy, we will continue to fight. And going back into the start of this conversation, do we want to be in a state of peace and patience and relaxation and contentment and fulfillment, or do we want to be in a state of fight or flight? Because if we always perceive that we have an enemy, we'll always be fighting against something. My personal belief is we have no enemy except ourselves and our thoughts at certain
Mm.
times. And the solutions already exist to us if we're willing to look at that. And what would that take for us to change our perception that there is nobody to fight against and that we are abundant, the earth is abundant, everything is available to us at all times, right? We have access to the most beautiful nutrient dense food on the face of the planet, pretty much anywhere in the world that we are. If we choose to, and here's the most important part, if we choose to look for it and go on the adventure to find it.
Mm.
Now, what is that like? It's different for every single person. Now, other people will hear this and go, well, it's not readily available where I am. I'm like, okay, are there solutions around that that are available to you? Can you perhaps purchase in bulk? Can you perhaps fill up your car with frozen meat from a butcher or a farm that's maybe a few hours away and have a chest freezer? Obviously, there might be some um, budgetary concerns into this, but if you buy a 700 litre chest freezer, you can purchase all your meat your family needs probably for a year
Mm.
from one cow. Where are you going to find that? I'll leave that up to you,
Sure.
right? I'm not going to hold your hand to teach you how to find
But the
your
solution is there.
your I believe the solution is there for
Mm.
most people. Well, Pete, I just can't do that because it's too expensive. And I will come back and say, well, have you considered eating nose to tail organ meats, liver, heart, blood, bones into soups? Perhaps the cheaper cuts of the meat and learning how to cook them, and then going shopping if you want to eat seafood. Are you willing to eat sardines? Are you willing to eat the $2 a kilo mullet? Are you willing to eat the most cheapest form of nutrition that's out there? well, no, I would never eat liver or heart because it's disgusting.
That's
And
right.
then I would counter that with, well, every single culture on the face of the planet has learned how to not only learned how to appreciate, but to desire these products with different herbs and spices and different cooking techniques.
Hmm.
What are you willing to do and go on to the adventure to face your fears? Because eating liver and heart and kidneys and these types of things, it's just a fear. And so this podcast that we're talking about today is confronting fears. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to keep coming up with excuses that limit your experience to what is the potential solution that's out there? Oh, well, my children are fussy eaters and they would never eat this. Have you persevered? And the studies show that if you offer a child the same food up to 20 times, that eventually on the 20th or 21st time, they will accept that.
Hmm.
You know, again, and I'm not being a prick about this, but
Mm.
but we create excuses. Oh, I'm not going to go into the ocean because I'm fearful of sharks. I'm not going to speak up because I'm fearful of losing friends on social media for speaking up my truth. Am I willing to cook a different style of cut of meat
Mm.
because I think it's taste disgusting and I don't want to do that because I'm scared of eating that,
Yeah.
So this is about potentially facing fears. Am I willing to not have the belief that there's an enemy out there always wanting to attack me, whether it be the government or medicine or anything like this? What about if I can create a new life for myself where I'm out of those systems? If I can feed myself and go on the adventure of confronting my fears and getting into this beautiful state of peace and contentment in my life to the best of my ability, perhaps I will not have to suffer depression. Maybe if I
Yeah.
work through my past traumas, I will not have anxiety. Maybe if I fuel my body with certain foods, I will not create heart disease, cancer, autoimmune disease, behavioral issues, dementia, Alzheimer's in my future. Maybe I will never have to take another pharmaceutical in my life or
Yes.
ever, and I will have prevention as my primary incentive in life so that
Mm.
I will never have to go into the medical system unless I have an accident and fall off the ladder or have an injury, a car accident or something that I couldn't control anyway. Maybe I'll never have to be a part of the pharmaceutical complex, the
Mm.
modern medical complex. Maybe if I explore a book like The Bitcoin Standard by Safadine Amos that's over in my corner, maybe I will learn a way to create long-term regenerative wealth for myself and my family so they are not slaves into the system, into the future of the banking cartel and the governments. And Oh, well, I've heard that's a scam, that Bitcoin thing. I'm on these truther pages and they're talking about that, you know, that it's all a scam and I should be fearful of it. Well,
Yeah.
have you spent 100 hours, 1,000 hours studying Bitcoin for yourself to then make the opinion through the research that you've done instead of word of mouth from somebody that's fearful and distrusting of everything that's out there?
Mm.
Right? Perhaps I can get out of this system that we're currently in with the financial system and the banking. Um, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, right? Maybe there's a way out of this. Maybe potentially there's a way I can grow some of my own food, even if I just start with herbs on the windowsill or in my pot plants on the thing that I can save myself a little bit of money and add beautiful nutrients and flavors into my food. What about this, that, and the other? I
Mm.
guess where I'm going to here is we can fight or we can create. And I celebrate the people that are out there fighting. It would be great to get fluoride out of town
Right.
water. But there is a solution, even though it costs to be able to get fluoride out of our drinking water if we choose to,
Yeah.
and out of our bathing water if we choose to at this particular point in time, right? There are solutions out there which cost money. I'm all for the people fighting it against fluoride to get out of our
Mm.
town water. I choose not to live in an area that has town water, and I chose to have a property through the choices that I've made in my life
Mm,
that many have been challenging to get to a place where I drink spring water every day. And that might seem elitist or, not everybody can do that. But there is spring water available where people can fill up their 10 litre, 20 litre water, glass water things and bring it home so they can drink it. There are
mm,
sites that you can go to where you can access spring water, if you choose to do it, or buy a good filter for your home.
sure.
So I guess where I'm going is that there are solutions available to us right now for
I love it, Pete.
everything. For
I love it.
everything.
Yeah, I love it. I think like I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, and I sort of had this little title. It was like when no means yes. So saying no to something is saying yes to something else, right? So you can say no to the seed oils, the cereals, and all the rest of it, and say yes to grass-fed beef and whole fruits and vegetables and locally grown. You can say no to Coles and Woolies, and you can say yes to the local farmers and who knows, communities, neighbours. We've got little gardens around here that people have just like put in a patch of land that's beside their house, and everyone can go there as a community, and they can go and pick and they can nurture the garden. So like that's a minute or two away from my doorstep. So I think these options are available anywhere, and I like where you went with, you don't have to fight against the red dyes and the fluorides, but you can also steer your attention, your direction, your money towards things that benefit you, and that starves itself. It dies out of existence because people would have to change, iterate. If no one's buying it, if the uptake is not there, then they either have to change their business model or they go out of business. Does that make sense? Like you
Yeah.
kind of create that change through your actions. And I think that goes back to being sovereign, having your own autonomy, that connection to self. That I'm whole and complete as I am. I don't need anyone to come and save me. I can save myself. I mean, and that whole fight thing. I mean, fuck, I got thrown in like hook, line, and sinker. I went for it when the pandemic come along. I was like, this is an attack, and I'm ready. So it was one of
Well,
those things that I
it
fought.
wasn't.
Anyway,
It
go
was
on.
an attack. It was an attack. So
Yeah, look,
you're
it was.
right.
But what I'm saying is, I went into fight mode. I screamed and ranted and went down that thing. I had all sorts of stuff going wrong with my life and business and marriage and all that kind of shit. So to me, I was fighting every day. But I got to tell you, when you fight for a long period of time, you fucking die. Like your body doesn't have a chance to regenerate. It doesn't have a chance to rest and recuperate. So I feel like I spoke to Andy Kaufman the other day, and I was like saying the same sort of thing. He's like, I don't believe there's an enemy. I don't believe there's a fight there. But if it arrives on my doorstep, I'm prepared, is what he was saying. Like up until that point, I'm living my best life. And that best life, as you pointed out, is helping yourself get in the position where you have the highest probability, the highest chance, the healthiest position that you can be in mind, body, and spirit, that if anything was come your way, you'd be able to handle that. And food is medicine. I love what you're saying about this. For me, it's music, because people, you don't know what you don't know. And when it comes to food, I don't think people realize just how great you can feel physically, mentally, like your mental clarity, the way that when you are physically fit, strong, healthy, when you can get on a surfboard or a skateboard like you and start turning tricks at 52 years of age and things like that. Like, it gives you an inner confidence and power, and that is, that's a force. I don't care how you put it, like that's a force to be reckoned with. And if anyone was tapping into that more often than not, I mean, we'd all be unstoppable, right? These people wouldn't have the power that they seemingly have.
Well, eating itself is just so beautiful. Like and cooking is so beautiful.
Mm,
And I invite anybody that sees cooking as a chore to perhaps think of it as a beautiful adventure that you're going to go on, that you will look forward to becoming a master at, whether you have male or female. Like it should. I don't like to use the word should. It's it comes down to a perception. I look. I've got some beautiful chicken I've defrosted yesterday. I've got a brisket down at the retreat that's in another fridge that I'm going to cook tomorrow. I've got some sausages as well that I'm going to be cooking today, and I've pulled out some scallops that were in the freezer. Like, I'm so fucking excited about the food that I'm going to be cooking over the next 3 days, right?
Yeah.
I can't, that's no word of a fucking lie. So I get excited about this. And it's not because I'm a chef, it's because my perception is I'm going to create something that's delicious and memorable for me that I'm excited about. When I
Mm.
go for a surf in the morning, I get excited I drive an hour to go to the beach from where I live. For that hour, I'm excited about what I'm about to experience, right? When I'm out there, I'm excited about what I'm going to experience. On the drive home, I'm excited to see my wife or my kids if they're with me. I'm excited about that. I look forward to it. I look forward to fucking watching TV of a night time, some Netflix or something. Like, I look forward to this. I look forward to reading my book. I'm excited about it all. There's no element in my life that I'm not excited about.
Mm.
Can if cooking is something that you feel like is a chore and you're not excited about, it's just perception. It's just that you haven't unlocked the adventure in this craft. And it's the simplest thing in the world to do. It's a list of ingredients with a certain method with a desired outcome.
Mm.
Ingredients, method, it's already there. There's tens of thousands of recipes tried and tested and proven with a desired outcome. And then it's for you to play with the adventure of the spices that you like or the seasoning that you like. And you could start off with, like yesterday, I cooked some beautiful wild snapper for my wife and I. Olive oil, garlic, some basil, squeeze of lemon juice, full stop. Like,
That's it.
it took 5 minutes and it was so freaking delicious.
Yeah.
Like
Also,
can,
that's self-sustainable too, Pete. I think like, when we could take it back to your book and the directive towards like healthy kids and things like that. I think if you can start with that education, that influence around your children, that's what you do, and that's the enjoyment that you take out of creating something. It goes back to that creation, and then pass that down to your children. I think that sense of autonomy, that sense of achievement, that sense of I can serve myself, right? And I don't feel helpless. I don't feel like I'm babied or mothered or anything like that. And it's something that I'm starting to see with my kids as they become, well, I've got three teenagers now. My littlest boy is 13 today.
you happy
So
birthday.
so it's one of those things where I see them now, like they can get, some mince or some chicken or a steak or whatever it is. And I'm the same. We've got, Scotch fillet that's in the fridge and chicken thigh fillets and all that kind of stuff. And it's all bagged and prepped and ready to go. As soon as you defrost it, it's your meal's half done sort of thing. But they're doing it themselves now. They're learning how to cook a steak properly. They're learning how to, turn eggs and cook a mince patty and all those sorts of things. And get some rice going, some coconut rice, and just add a few little bits and pieces to make things enjoyable. Scrambled eggs, all shit like that. Like, so now instead of going to the cupboard where we used to have cereals and rice crackers and fucking all the chips and all that kind of stuff, there's nothing there. So they've only got to go to the fridge now. They've got to scramble eggs. They've got to cook bacon. Like there's no other choices for them. And if I'm not around, which I'm often not, I'm out here, there, and everywhere doing work. And if they're home from school, that's the option that they have. They either sit and starve, or they eat fruit, or grab a cucumber or something like that, or they cook themselves a meal.
But it's like, the I'm not a fanatic about my food. I just, the majority of the food is always great, but you know, once upon a time when I learned the dietary principles, I got in the state of fear over certain foods, like the crackers and the this and that and the other, and I'm grateful that I went through that fear because now, I don't see food as an enemy. Any of it as an enemy to me. If you gave me red food dye Fruit Loops, for instance, and that's all I had to eat, I'd eat it and I wouldn't see it as the enemy because I'd have the belief that this is, a once off or a once in a while thing. Whereas once upon a time, I'd freak out going back
Yeah.
15 years ago. Like everything's a threat. I
Yes.
can't trust anything. I can't trust my body to detox
Figure it out.
these ingredients, right?
Mhm.
So I've gone through that arc, whereas now I just look at, if I go to a mate's house and they've got whatever, I'll eat it. If
Yeah.
it's bread or it's whatever. I
Mhm.
went on a surf trip last year to Indonesia, and you know, it wasn't the type of food that I would normally eat. And I was there for a week. I'm just like, you know what? I'm so excited to go surfing in Indonesia at this beautiful surf camp. I'll eat whatever they serve me with gratitude, with with peace, with contentment, with just so much grace, and just
Sky.
trust my body to do what it needs to do in that
Mm.
experience, right? I didn't get sick. I didn't
Yeah.
I didn't end up in a hospital ward or with diabetes or this, that, and the other,
Yeah.
It was just like my intention is, when in Rome or when in Indo, just eat what they're eating, and
That's the power of
it's a
belief. Mm.
it's a really nice place to get to, where I'm not fearful of anything anymore. Food, the government, the agendas, the this, that, and the other. It's just like, you know, if I ever have to turn into the alpha and protect, I can do that, you know. But at the moment, I don't feel like I need to do it. And I think, I'm so grateful that COVID happened, and a lot of people will uh, question why I say that. But look what's happening. Bobby
Yeah.
Kennedy Jr. Right now, I do not think this would have happened if we didn't just experience the last 5 years.
I agree.
And you know, and I know it's challenging for a lot of people, and there's been tragedies that have happened through it, and my heart goes out to anyone that has lost people through this period or is suffering from effects of these things.
Mm.
Um, it's horrific, for a lot of people.
There is, but
And
it's not, it's synonymous. There's always, it's not just synonymous with COVID. There's always silver linings and lessons and life lessons to be learned. I agree with you. I'm coming out the other side now with optimism, and there's opportunities now that this would never have happened if it wasn't for COVID. Like it just yeah, the fact that I can be sitting here, talking to Pete Evans, that wasn't on my radar in 2020. So, like I was just trying to go get along with my life and do my thing. But I guess that whole stripping back of what reality is or what your perception of reality is it's an interesting thing. It definitely is a blessing, and it's something that I think if you can take it with that, and I know that people have experienced horrific things. I was just lucky enough that I just lost money. You know, I didn't lose any ability to sort of think or function or my life or anything like that, obviously. So, yeah, I feel pretty blessed in that respect. But anyway, Pete, man, we could talk all day. I don't think there's any shortage of conversation and things like that. I really did want to go deeper into your book, but I think we'd probably be here for another hour. Um, but I appreciate you, and I guess the best thing for me to ask is for if people do want to find out not more about just your work, but your literature, the books, and everything. Like, where was the best place for people to go to discover you, to maybe get into the things that you're doing, your retreats, all that kind of stuff? Where should I go?
probably the best place. I've got a subscription-based platform called evolvenetwork.tv.
Hmm.
Um, It's just a website, but it has 1,000 of my recipes and meal plans and all the podcasts and documentaries that are on there. Costs $100 a year.
Oh,
You know,
really?
I
So affordable.
yeah, it's some people would say that's expensive, others would say it's cheap. Again, it's there if people want it. I invite people to explore it if it resonates with you, and if it doesn't, all the information is pretty much available anyway for free on the internet in one way, shape, or form. So that's there, and then I'm on Instagram, Telegram, Chef Pete Evans. Hard to, and I just joined X, whatever that is. And,
Yeah.
yeah, but Chef Pete Evans, you'll find me, and be careful. There's lots of fake accounts out there that
Yeah,
is
sure.
my name. So,
Yeah, that old nugget.
but Adrian, it's been an honor to be on your show once again, and to be able to chat with you. And love you, brother, and love to everybody that's listened and watched today. And again, if anything resonates, fantastic. If it doesn't, just let it go. These are just my perceptions and beliefs, and it is what it is.
Love it. Love you, Pete. Thank you very much, mate. I look forward to circling back one time soon, I'm sure. Until then, have a great day.
Thanks, mate. And congratulations on everything you're doing too. Love you.
Thank you, buddy. All right, bye.